Welcome to our Academic Skills video series, hosted by me, your favourite librarian. This video is going to explore academic formatting in more detail. Although this will be relevant to a range of assignments, we are probably thinking most specifically about coursework, where the formatting can be strict. All of the examples we look at are going to be using Microsoft Word, so the screenshots are all lifted from there. To start, you need two different things. The first may seem very obvious, but it is understanding what we mean by formatting. In academia, this is how your work is presented. By this, I mean how it looks on the page, such as the line spacing, as well as additional requirements around headers and footers. Don't worry, we will explore this in more depth. You also need to know what formatting your work requires. Different subjects may have slight variations, but all will inform you of what is expected. Make sure you know this information ahead of any submission deadlines so you aren't rushing to complete it last minute. Okay, confident you have an idea of what we mean by formatting and what is expected of your work? Then let's get this show on the road. We are going to focus on 5 different aspects of formatting today. How to insert appropriate header information, how to insert page numbers, using appropriate line spacing, how to insert hanging indents in bibliographies, and stating and finding out the word count. You may already be confident with how to do all of these, or some you may not be familiar with. We are also going to take a little think on why this formatting is important, so stick around for that too. As the name suggests, a header lives at the head of every page. This field is used to record information which needs to be present on every page. Something to note here is that this information will be identical each time. The most common use of a header in coursework is for candidate details. These normally comprise of your full legal name, the centre number, which for Harris Westminster is 10948, the centre name, which is Harris Westminster Sixth Form, and your candidate number. Note that your candidate number is not the same as your ID number. Your ID number is the one on your ID card starting with HW. You can find your candidate number by looking at your exam timetable, as it will be displayed there. If you cannot find your candidate number for any reason, ask a member of staff who will be able to tell you it. Check if you need to include a header in your work, and if so, what exactly it should contain. We are now going to have a look at how you can add a header to your work. Firstly, we need to be on the tab labelled Insert and, unsurprisingly, the icon labelled Header. Click on this and it will open the header menu for you, where you can choose the design you would like. The first option is the standard option. Click on this and you can then enter the required details. When you are finishing editing your header, it will show as grey on the page as opposed to the default black text. Don't worry, it will appear as black text if you print out your work. To edit your header at a later date, simply double-click on the grey text in the header and it will open for revision for you. Now, it may seem an obvious reason as to why we use page numbers on a document, but let's think about this anyway. Firstly, it allows a reader to easily navigate your work. If they have to pause reading it, for example, then they can find the page that they left off quickly, much the way you would with a book. Another good reason to ensure you have page numbers is that for anyone assessing your work, they can use these in their annotations and comments. With all assessed work, you want to make it as easy as possible for the marker. Lastly, page numbers are a useful editing tool. When reading over your work, you can easily jot down if you need to refine your paragraphs on page 6 or tidy up your referencing on page 8. It certainly sounds like a good idea to have some page numbers, so let's look at how we add those. Again, we are going to be on the tab labelled Insert, but this time we are going to choose the page number option. From this, I'm going to select the bottom of the page, as I have my candidate information at the top of the page and I don't want it to get crowded there. I'm going to choose to insert my page numbers on the right hand side. This is so when my work is stapled together, I can easily see the page numbers when flicking through it. As the bottom right hand side is the most common space for page numbers, this is where they will be looked for. Once I've clicked on this option, my page numbers will be added in. Something to note here is that your pages are automatically numbered. If you move work around or add or delete pages, it will update the numbering. You don't have to worry about doing so. Clever. Now, I wager that line spacing isn't something you probably thought about much before. Simply put, it is the space between lines of text on a page. The closer the lines together, the harder text can be to read. Why do we want to make our assignments easy to read? Remember that when your work is assessed, the person doing so will be reading countless pages of text. We therefore want our coursework to be as easy on their eyes as possible, leaving space to both read and also annotate. If your lines are too closely packed together, then an assessor cannot easily add comments demonstrating where you have gained marks. It is therefore a good idea, and often a requirement of coursework, to ensure that you are not just using the default spacing. Let's look at how this works in practice. First, you need to start in the default Home tab. In the Paragraph tab below this, click on the small arrow in the right-hand corner to open the additional options. You will now see on this new menu that spacing is an option to change. It is here you can select either 1.5 or double line spacing, as opposed to the default, which is labelled as single or in some cases multiple. So how does this different spacing look? Well, here is a single spaced piece of text. Not too shabby, but if you have pages and pages of this, it can be rather grating on the eyes. Next, we have 1.5. More space between the lines, making this easier to read. Lastly, we have double spacing, which has the biggest distance between the lines. This format is especially useful for annotating. Subjects may differ in if they require you to use 1.5 or double line spacing, so check this when formatting your work for submission. As a minimum, I would recommend 1.5 for all assessed work. If you have watched the academic skills tutorial on how to reference, you will have heard me mention a hanging indent as part of a bibliography. This piece of formatting is often considered the standard for bibliographies, as it makes them easier to read and, as a result of this, easier to find a specific reference. It is useful, therefore, to use this piece of formatting with your bibliography. So let's have a look at how to do this. Again, we are going to start in the default Home tab, specifically the additional options in the Paragraph tab. Last time we visited spacing, and this time we are going to focus on indentation. Here I can change my indent from none to hanging. To make sure this formatting is applied, highlight your bibliographic references before clicking through these formatting options. So how will my references in my bibliography change? As you can see, I go from default formatting to an indent. This means that it is super obvious who the author is in my bibliography, as it makes the author names more prominent and easy to read. Take a look at the bibliography next time you read an article and you will see this formatting present. Sadly, you aren't allowed endless words when writing assignments. At university, you can even be docked marks if you are significantly above or below the word count. It is therefore important that you know what the word count is for your work and what this word count includes. By this, I mean, do references and quotations form part of it, or are they separate to it? Knowing the word count is also useful for the editing process. If your work is too long, does it need to be trimmed down? Is there a specific section which is hogging all of your words and taking too long to get to the point? Keeping an eye on the word count can help with this. A lot of coursework submissions will also require you to state your word count clearly, so make sure you've done that if that's required. The word count is displayed at the bottom of the page on the left-hand side. If you click on it, it will display additional details for you. I mentioned previously that sometimes footnote references aren't included in the word count. If this is the case, you can unselect this option. If you want to know how many words your introduction is eating up, for example, you can highlight this section and the word count at the bottom will reflect only that specific piece of your work. As I mentioned, this is a useful tool to check if you are maybe focusing more on one point within your essay than another, so do make use of it. I hope this has helped you to gain an understanding of the different formatting tools available to you in Word. To end, I'm going to throw down some top tips to keep in mind when undertaking formatting. Firstly, ensure you know the specific requirements for your work. Not all subjects want the same degree of line spacing or require the same information in the header. Double check what your assignment wants and make sure it is present. Secondly, leave yourself enough time to format. None of the formatting we have looked at is difficult, but it isn't something you want to be stress clicking and trying to complete 30 seconds before a deadline. Leave yourself time to make sure it is all present and correct. Lastly, remember that everyone is here to help you. You can speak to your teacher if you are struggling with what formatting is required for your assignment. You are, of course, always welcome to drop into the library or book a one-to-one meeting with me using the Book a Librarian tile. Do also take a watch of the other videos in the skills series to help hone your academic skills further. Happy formatting!